The history of how Caribbean people didn't just move to Brooklyn, they saved it. Before the aeroplane, our people traveled to New York on steamships. This was before Brooklyn was a brand, before Brooklyn had coffee shops and luxury condos. It was a refuge. People fled New York, but among those who built it, shaped it, and saved it when others fled were the people of the Caribbean. As early as 1613, Caribbean members started to trickle in New York. As the first registered Caribbean member in New York was Mr. Juan Rodriguez from Santo Domingo. He came as the first non-indigenous person to settle in what was then New Amsterdam, what they call New York City today. The Caribbean connection to Brooklyn is no coincidence because that is where Brooklyn started. By the early 1900s, the largest wave of black immigrants coming to America were English-speaking Caribbean people. Caribbean people settled mainly in the Northeast. Caribbean people made up only 1.3% of New York City's population, and they faced intense racism and xenophobia at the time. But Caribbean people did not turn back. They were resilient. By 1920, Caribbean immigrants made up roughly a quarter of the entire black population of New York City. They came from Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Haiti. Many were young, many were alone. They entered the service sector, working as doormen, laborers, porters. The women often worked as maids and nannies, but a substantial number of them attended night school and pursued higher education. They were building something special. Caribbean people had to form their own community organizations. They had to form their own church. Caribbean migrants didn't just survive in New York. They organized. After being denied entry into white churches, they formed black churches such as St. Augustine and Christ Church Cathedral in Brooklyn. West Indies society also developed mutual benefit societies, organizations designed to financially and socially assist recent immigrants. Membership was based on country origin. They used up what they learned. They bring their partner system, which was a system where you throw your weekly draw, you get your weekly draw, you throw your weekly contribution, and you would get a pool at certain time. They find their way, they funded their way to survive. So between 1920s to 1940s, West Indies people built their church in New York. West Indies people made their own lifeline. They set up social clubs such as informal banks, employment networks, and mental health resources all in one. So by the 1940s, Caribbean migrants were filling labor shortages that rose during World War II. So there was a gap there, taking jobs in factory, transportation, healthcare, and kept the city running while American men went to war. After World War II, most Caribbean migrants started moving out of Harlem and into Brooklyn. At the time, Caribbean people took up residence mostly in Bed-Stuy and Crown Heights. In 1960, Crown Heights was 70% white, but by 1970, Crown Heights was 70% black. So a large number of English-speaking Caribbean migrants brought their families and bought homes in Crown Heights, while their French and Spanish-speaking neighbors bought homes and take up residence in Flatbush, Brooklyn. Then in 1965, everything changed. At first, there was a quota, which meant there was a cap on the amount of people who could enter the United States from the Caribbean before 1965. The Immigration and National Act of 1965 abolished national origin quotas that had choked Caribbean immigration for decades. The floodgates were open. There were 700,000 legal migrants that entered New York between 1982 and 1989 alone, and they were all from the Caribbean. 5 Caribbean countries: Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Haiti, and Barbados. By 1980 up to today, a third of every passenger that come into New York is from one of the 5 Caribbean countries. But in 1977, Brooklyn had to start all over again, because in 1977, on July 13th, there was a blackout triggering a night of looting and arson. In just 24 hours, arsonists set over 1,000 fires and looters raided over 1,600 businesses, causing over $300 million in damages and losses at the time. Brooklyn was already starved of investment, so they were devastated. Whole blocks of Brownsville Central Business Artery, Pitkin Avenue, were reduced to rubble. It looked, as one Jamaican immigrant recalled, like a war had gone through there. This caused the middle-class families to flee. Then Caribbean people moved in and bought those places and rebuilt. Caribbean progress was evident, and they had debunked the myth that they were a strain on the social services of the United States. They proved this theory that the fact that immigrants and black immigrants were living mostly in New York, Miami, and Los Angeles, they had less unemployment and had higher incomes than blacks in cities like Cleveland, St. Louis, or Detroit. So drop us your country and city. Let us know where you're watching from so we could send you a shout out in our next video. In this video, shout out goes to Horatio Williams in USA, Georgia, and Sam Booth Jr. in Los Angeles, California. Perhaps nowhere was the Caribbean community's impact more profound or less celebrated than in the healthcare sector in New York. Caribbean migrants work in high-demand sectors, particularly healthcare. They help to build that, education, and domestic care. Through the 5 boroughs in New York, hospitals alone generate over $10 billion in annual salaries. But in some Brooklyn institutions, the majority of jobs were held by immigrants, while majority of the patients were impoverished African Americans. The contribution to education is enormous. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, a denomination with over 40,000 Caribbean members in the Northeast, a conference virtually all members are immigrants, built a network of over 15 schools, opening 6 in Brooklyn alone, with an education budget of over $6 million paid almost entirely by tuition. Caribbean migrants didn't wait on the government to build these schools, they built them themselves. The once Church Avenue, now renamed Bob Marley Boulevard in his honor, and you are somewhere else entirely. There are jerk chicken grills in oil drums, soursop and coconut water pour from market stands, steel drums and soca fill the air, flags of Trinidad, Jamaica, Haiti, Grenada, Barbados hang from apartment windows like decorations. For over 100 years, Caribbean migrants have been settling in Brooklyn, making the borough home to one of the largest and most diverse communities of Caribbean people in the world. The West Indian Day Parade alone generates over $300 million for New York City. Now, the people who rebuilt Brooklyn when it burnt down are now being repriced out of their borough that they rebuilt. Brooklyn's black population, including thousands of Caribbean families, fell by 70,000 between 2010 and 2020, driven by high rising rents. In recognition of the community's deep roots, streets have been renamed. Jean-Jacques Dessalines Boulevard and Toussaint Louverture Boulevard and Bob Marley Boulevard are just a few streets named after Caribbean heroes. Brooklyn did not build itself. It was built by people who came with nothing.